Hello everyone and welcome to today's Azure webinar. I am Shalini Boudoir, the marketing from MC3, and today's presenter will be Mohamed Amor from Netexio, who will talk about Microsoft Azure hybrid backup, disaster recovery solution, and we'll go through some demos. A recorded version of this webinar will be available after the meeting. We'd love to hear from you, so please drop down your question in the Q&A section. And for those of you just joining us, welcome to our Azure webinar. So let's get started.
Okay, thank you, Shalini, for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to deliver this webinar, and I really hope that everybody joining us will get a lot of value from this section. So we are broadcasting this webinar using the live event, the Teams live event feature. If you have any questions, just use the Q&R section to post your questions. So I will not be able to have you speak live with your microphone or webcam. So if you have any questions, just type them in the chat section, and at the end of the session we will come back over these questions, and I will do my best to bring you the best answer for that question. So my name is Mohamed Amar, and I will be delivering this webinar about disaster recovery and backup solutions with Microsoft Azure. What will we be talking about in this during this webinar? I will make a brief introduction of Netexio. We will talk about Microsoft Azure and hybrid cloud, an overview of disaster recovery solutions, how to use Azure BackUp and Azure Disaster Recovery. I will show you some features with some demos, and we will have a Q&A. Let me first introduce myself. I am Mohamed Amar Aj. I am speaking to you from Dakar in Senegal, West Africa. You have my LinkedIn profile in case you want to connect professionally. So I am a consultant and trainer on Microsoft technologies. I have been doing that since 2003. As a Microsoft trainer, I have had the opportunity to lead training, implementation, and consulting missions in several countries in Africa and Europe. I started my career in electrical engineering, but I have also had experiences in software development, system administration, IT operations, and cloud solution architecture. So I have gathered most of my IT operations experience in projects with customers, but also as an employee at a telco operator here in Senegal. So when I will be talking to you about backup and disaster recovery, it is something that I have experienced from the planning phase, from the implementation means, and also it is an experience I have personally lived when we had some situations where we quickly had to do a disaster recovery scenario. So this is not something theoretical for me, and I will be doing my best to show you how you can be more comfortable with your data backup and disaster recovery scenarios using Microsoft Azure. Let me introduce Netexio. So Netexio is a company based in Senegal. We are a digital services company. We provide consulting and training services to businesses of all sizes. And we have a focus on Microsoft technologies. We have now reached the gold Microsoft partner level with the different certified consultants we have in-house, and also the customer references we have been accumulating over the years. So what do we provide as services? Information systems consulting, collaboration and business productivity. We also help you with your data management and analysis. We also provide services about on enterprise content management and business processes. We also help you better manage your customer relationship management solutions. We love to provide training and certification, and this is something that we do our best to embed in every of the projects that we have. We always try to train the IT staff, the technical staff, but also the user staff. We know for sure that in order to have a good return on investment on the solutions that you have paid for and the services, it is best if the IT staff knows how to operate it, how to improve it, and also the users know how to use most of the features. And finally, we also help you with your licensing optimization. And this is something that we have done with several of our customers. They had really large bills when it came to their Azure subscriptions and also to their Office 365 subscriptions also, and we help them optimize it in order not to overspend and to have the right features for the right users. So just as a reminder also, if ever you have any questions, don't hesitate to post them in the chat section, and I will do my best to come back over it with Shalini from MC3 to bring you the best answers for that. What technologies do we mainly work on? So we have the SharePoint and the Power Platform for collaboration, enterprise content management, and business processes. So when I speak of the Power Platform, it's about Power Apps, Power Automate, and the Power BI. So we have built lots of experiences on these solutions. Data management platforms with SQL Server databases, and business intelligence scenarios and Power BI, Microsoft 365 and Azure Cloud Solutions, which are really the core of which are the core components of our offerings, and also the basis, the foundation with Windows Server and System Center infrastructures. Some of our partners and successes, as I was telling you at the beginning, we have a large spectrum of customers in different industries, in financial, in telco, in agribusiness, in fintech. We are displaying here some of our customers. Some of the projects are about Microsoft Cloud Solutions, others are about training, and others are partnerships, because we often have partnerships with other Microsoft partners or other systems integrators when in their projects they have needs to have really high-level competencies on Microsoft technologies. So as I said, we have reached the Microsoft Gold partner status with our in-house consultants and our customer references. So that's it for Netexio. Now let's talk about what is bringing us here together, which is Microsoft Azure. So what is a company looking for when they have when they want to host their information system on a cloud solution? They want something that can allow them to innovate for their needs, that is open, that is hybrid, that is designed for results so that the developers can be very productive in the solutions. We have a built-in management and security, and we can also build solutions and custom apps. And also something that is secure and compliant and has a global footprint with its global data centers. So we don't want something that is only dependent on one location. We want to have a scalable and a robust solution. When we speak about choice and flexibility, what I can also always say to our customers and our prospects is that it's not only about Microsoft. If you have other technologies you are using that are based on Linux technologies, that are based on other, for the databases and middleware that are based on something other than SQL, your Hadoop or HOTLWorks or Cloud Data Solutions can be hosted on Azure. They have partnerships with Azure. Personally, I have already been hosting WordPress or Joomla applications on Azure with all the monitoring tied to it. And for the infrastructure part, of course, you can deploy your Windows Server solutions on Azure, but also your other Linux distributions. And apart from the operating system virtualization, you can also use Docker technology to use the container solutions in order to have a more agile hosting of your applications and other solutions. If you are also hosting applications on Azure, you can host several application frameworks, of course, .NET, Node.js, Python, Java, PHP, Ruby, and a lot of other solutions. So if you're a developer, developers can also use Azure for several levels. So they can use Azure to host all their DevOps processes, the development, the testing, the release schedules. They can also have on Azure their testing environment and their production environment. And once the solution, let's say it's a web application or a mobile application, once it is hosted on Azure, they also have all the tools to monitor the application. What is the level of use of this application? What are the different bugs that are encountered, and to have a really clean and precise detection of what is happening on that application. Of course, we can also talk about the certifications, depending on different levels of certification, the HIPAA certification, PCI DSS level 1, ISO 27018, and several other certifications that can allow you to stay compliant whenever you are hosting your systems or your data on Azure. So this is the global footprint of the 60 Azure regions worldwide, and I was really happy to tell to my customers that Microsoft Azure is the first major cloud provider to have globally available data centers in Africa. Okay, so it is true that it is still in South Africa, but that's a really important point for our customers, and it's always expanding. So expect to see more of these points globally available, depending on the demand and on the workloads. If I have a more global vision of what are the Azure solutions I can expect to have on Azure, of course, I have my development and testing. The point we will be talking about more precisely here is the backup, archive, and disaster recovery. But I can also host my business intelligence and analytics solutions, internal business apps. So using Azure does not always mean that it is for public application or customer-facing apps. I can have my internal business apps hosted on Azure, and we have some scenarios with our customers where there is no public IP. It is not publicly accessible. So in order to access the solutions, you will be using a VPN connection and a VPN connection between the customer's data center and the Azure subnetwork. So there is also the partnerships with other big providers like SAP, Red Hat, and IoT scenarios. So I don't expect you to see all the details for this platform, but this is just to give you, from the architecture point of view, a global view of the security and management solutions, media, content delivery network, application platform, data solutions. So this is to give you a big picture of what Azure can provide you. Even though we will be more focused on the backup and disaster recovery scenario. So this is just to tell you that Azure is a really large platform. So I can be working for Azure for years and not master all the offer that is provided. So this is a really open platform, and everyone can find the services he is looking for, be it developer, analytics and IoT, hybrid cloud. So this is really something important for me and the customers I talk to. They know that they will not be sending all their workload to the cloud. They still have an existing base on premises, and they need to have a link with that Azure environment. So the hybrid scenarios are very interesting. Before I go any further, just let me show you a little demo of the Azure portal. So if any of you has already used the Azure, just write a small text on the chat form. Just tell me if you have already or not yet used the Azure, and for what technology was it. So just write it on the chat window. So this is my my Azure portal. Once I connect to the Azure portal, I have here a list of the resources I have been using in my subscription. So when I connect to Azure, I have a subscription that allows me to create my resources, and I can organize those resources in resource groups. But what I just wanted to show you is that at any point I can create a specific resource. The most popular resources appear here. So I can create a Windows Server 2016 data center virtual machine, Ubuntu, a web app, SQL Server database. I can also use the Azure Cosmos DB, a storage account if the only feature that I am looking for is to store some data. So let's say I want to create an Ubuntu virtual server for a web server scenario, or for any scenario that can be hosted on Linux. I'm going to choose my partner network. I can choose a resource group. So resource groups are just a way for me to organize and group my different resources. And I'm going to give a logical name to my server. I'm going to call it web server 01. Okay, I already have one with that name. Let's say 02. I can choose the region, and this really gives me a lot of flexibility. Just 1 minute so I can zoom in. So I can choose a region with depending on my location, or on my data center's location in the globe: East US, South Central US, North Europe, and I was talking to you about the South Africa, the African data centers. I have data centers also in the Middle East. And I have here my data centers. I can use South Africa North and South Africa West. So I'm going to choose my my specific data center. Am I going to need redundancy for this scenario? What is the Linux distribution I want to use? I have Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, Oracle Linux, or I can choose another operating system. And I can also choose the size of my virtual machine. So I'm going to choose from different sizes. Let's say I want this okay, let's say this size of virtual machine with 8 virtual CPUs, 56 gigabytes of RAM, and I can also have the information about the pricing here. Let's say our added value as a, let me just choose this one. Our added value as a partner will be to advise you on on the most recommended size of virtual machine that you can choose from. As you see, there are different categories. There are different offerings, each offerings with its performance, and this is for the compute size. After that, I can also select the the storage tiers, what types of disks am I going to choose, and our added value as a partner is to advise you with the most adapted scenario for your specific needs. So this is not just going to be a generic offer or proposal we are doing. So we are really trying to go in depth in what you want to do, and from that point, from that starting point, propose to you the most adapted Azure offerings for your objective. And I can also define here an SSH username and password, and the SSH port 22 will be open. Okay, let me just do some. I will not go through all this. I will just put a password that will allow me just to show you the disks that I want to use. So for the disks part, I can use different types of disks: standard HDD, standard SSD, or premium SSD. Each one has its features and its pricing, and we can also advise you for the best use scenarios. Also the networking size. So all this is for the different configurations that I can create for my virtual machine here. So I will just cancel that step, and I will just show you a specific case of a web server that I have already created. And I have here the different features with the operating system, the distribution level, and the networking elements, the disks that I can use or add or change, the size. So one advantage with this cloud solution is if I started with a small size for testing purposes, I can do an upgrade of my virtual machine once I go into production. I can also add extensions for my virtual machine, and this is just a case of this virtual machine. And if I was creating databases or data warehouses, I would have different configurations that I can use. As you noticed, I have not yet activated a backup for this machine, and this is something we will do in the subsequent demos. So Shalini, do we have any questions or comments before I go on to the next part?
No, Mohammed, you can proceed. We don't have any questions for now.
Okay. So after the overview of what Azure can can provide us for our company. One of the main needs we have is that we need to take into account the existing workload that we have on premises in our local data center. So this is not going away, and we need to integrate it with our cloud, the extension to our data centers that we are doing in the cloud. So we have a different spectrum of use, a large spectrum of use cases for our hybrid scenario. We have the backup, lift and shift VMs. Let's say we had on-premises virtual machines and we want to move them to the cloud. We have development and test environment, web applications. So I can have my web application on the cloud, but the database, the data is still in my local data center. Mobile access, seamless app mobility, and we have a host of hybrid application patterns. And the most important use case is when our customer wants to have the application hosted on Azure, but he still wants his data to remain local. So this is a typical hybrid scenario. When we have a hybrid scenario, we need to have consistency. Let's say I suppose that many of you have Active Directory as your on-premises user directory and a security solution. On the lower part of the slide, we have everything that can be on-premises. And on the upper side, we have its counterpart in the cloud, in the Azure cloud. So for Azure Active Directory, we can also have Azure Active Directory, and I can have a link, a secure link between these two entities. I create my users still locally, and they are replicated on the cloud on Azure Active Directory. So I don't have to manage two different user bases. On my on-premises infrastructure, I also need to manage my infrastructure, to manage the performances, to manage the backups, to manage the security. And on Azure, I also have my Azure Management and Security Suite. What does this mean if I manage a data center or I am a CIO for my company? It means that I can have a choice. My management solutions, will they be on premises with all the necessary investments, or can I also have them on the cloud, where I don't have to buy in bulk with a big investment, but I can pay as I go, and I can have a more complete solution than what I would have for my monitoring solution on premises. Same also for the database, for its SQL Server. I can also have the Azure Data Services and the link between these two entities. An Azure Stack is a solution provided by Microsoft where you have a subset of the Azure features, but installed, deployed on your local data center. And this is something that requires a lot of planning so that you can have on your local data center a subset of the features of Azure. If for compliance reasons you really cannot have any services on Azure for your specific line of business. So we always have this extension of the different features. If I look at it from a high-level point of view, I need to have my infrastructure, my data, my users, my apps, my management and security features, everything that I have locally, I need to have its counterpart on my Azure environment. And on Azure, I can have my Azure Security Center. So we have customers at the moment that use Azure Security Center to regularly analyze their on-premises infrastructure to have a good view of what is going on the security point of view on their local infrastructure. And what a customer told me is that Mohammed, this is really interesting because if I had to implement that locally, it would have cost me 10 times more in resources, on investment, on monitoring effort. So this is a security console, a dashboard that we provide him on Azure, and he pays by monitored node, by SQL Server node, by virtual machine that is monitored on the security point of view. Same thing for Azure Monitor. So this other specific customer uses Azure Monitor to have logs on what are the connections, what customers, what users are internally connecting to each system. So this is centralized with Azure Monitor. He also has linked his local Azure to Azure Active Directory, so he has a single sign-on experience. And more specifically, he uses Azure BackUp and Azure Site Recovery. And since then, he has told me that he is much more comfortable because he has his console. He knows that what he has chosen to back up on the cloud, he sees what backups have been successful, have failed, and he can take actions depending on those results. He also has a specific set of virtual machines that he has chosen to replicate to Azure. In case that he has problems locally, he can use the same virtual machines, the exact replica, but hosted on Azure, and his company can continue being productive. When we talk about backup, we talk about replication. What we need behind all of this is solid storage. So all those solutions I'm going to demo to you soon use Azure storage as a behind-the-scenes technology to store all the result of the backup, all the result of the replica. So I suppose if you are IT managers or CIOs or other functions or system administrators, I suppose you have already had quotations about buying storage space, whether is it a SAN or disks or any other storage solutions. And what Azure proposes you is that you don't have to make a massive investment to buy tens of terabytes at once. You just pay as you go. So you pay for the storage that you are using at the moment. You can start small, have a small amount of data on your Azure storage space. And as you increase, as you back up more and more data, you can adapt your payment to that storage. And we can also assist you in having good planification of that storage increase and consequently of what amount that you need to have in your budget to align to that to those storage needs. And it's the same for all those Azure services. So as I often say to my customers, it's not just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean it's it's easy. It's not just 2 or 3 clicks. What I like about Azure is that as IT planners, we need to be very precise on what resources we are going to use. We need to be precise on the amount of storage, on the amount of RAM, on the CPU, on the disk types. So we have to be very precise about every service that we are going to use. So for the backup and disaster recovery scenarios, we have specific needs. We need to protect important data with automated backup to Azure storage. We need to ensure business continuity with an automatic recovery, and we need to use consistent tools to do that, to back up, to have a site recovery, and also to restore, and also to have a transparent failover for our users. So the backup and disaster recovery is just a part of the suite that Azure provides you to manage your infrastructure. So we have the log analytics to know, to have a very precise view of what is happening on your local infrastructure. The IT automations to program tasks like backups, like password renewals, like certificate regenerations. And we also have the security and compliance. So we have customers that at each moment can have a security and compliance reports that tells them on this machine, even it's a local machine, it's on their local data center, on this local machine, these updates are missing. Or on this disk, you have not activated the encryption. Or on this server, you have these accounts that don't have a password expiration policy, a password renewal policy. So it gives you a global view of your security and compliance needs. And you can also have that same view for your backup and disaster recovery scenarios. So I have been talking about those two scenarios, and Azure provides two features. The first one is Azure Site Recovery. So it is a replica, it's a customizable disaster recovery solution that allows you to create a replica of your servers or of your virtual machines on the cloud. You don't have to replicate everything. You can choose what you want to replicate in case of disaster. So this server will allow you to have a replica of some virtual machines or some servers that are local or that are on your cloud. It can be an Amazon cloud, it can be a Google cloud, it can be Azure cloud, and you can replicate them to another region. In case you have a local outage, disaster, you can turn on those replicated virtual machines and use them as your production, because there will have been a replica of your existing environment before the disaster. And you can just redirect your users instead of connecting to the local servers that are no more accessible. You can redirect them via a secure channel to the servers that are on the Azure cloud, on the Azure Site Recovery. So that's one feature, but before that, a more classical feature is also the Azure BackUp. So you have a simple and reliable backup service that can back up your local services, your local servers, your cloud servers to Azure, and you can have a full monitoring suite for that feature. What we are looking for is a business continuity. So you have your on-premises data center. This is your primary site with your Windows server, your Hyper-V virtual machines, and you also have the VMware integration. So you can have your Azure Site Recovery with Hyper-V and VMware or on-premises servers. And you have all the means to have a replica of this infrastructure on your Azure Site Recovery. So why would I be using my cloud backup solution? It is to protect my valuable on-premises data. I can have a backup solution that backs up my local data to the cloud. Okay. I can also use the same solution to protect my Azure virtual machines that are already on the cloud, but to a different region in the cloud. So I can also have that backup. And I've been talking about virtual machines, but I can also back up other Microsoft type applications, such as SharePoint, Exchange, SQL Server, and Hyper-V. So I have a first question. I will come back to it in just in a few minutes. What I want to do is also have that backup solution, but also I want it to be cost effective. Maybe at this moment I don't have the budget to buy an expensive all-out backup integrated backup server backup solution. When I talk about backup, I also talk about storage for that backup. So I maybe don't have all the necessary budgets at this time to have terabytes, tens of terabytes of space to store that backup. I can do it on the cloud, and I can pay by terabyte that I'm using. If I start off with just 1 terabyte, I will be only paying for 1 terabyte. When my solution grows, I can monitor how it is growing. If I get to 10 terabytes, I will be paying for 10 terabytes and not more. It is also proportional to the number of nodes that I am backupping. I will not be paying the same price if I am backupping 1 server, 2 servers, or 200 servers. So it is all adapted to what I am buying. So I have a case question. Can I have a backup of my on-premise Active Directory on Azure for redundancy in case my on-premise ID is corrupted or hacked? Yes, you can have a backup of that on-premises, of that on-premise Active Directory. You can have it via several ways. One of the scenario would be you back up the system state of your Active Directory servers. So you can have a backup of that system state at the frequency at different frequencies, and that the system state of your Active Directory servers is regularly backed up on Azure. That is one scenario. If my Active Directory is hosted on virtual machines, I can also have a backup of those complete virtual machines on the cloud. So that is another possibility. Those virtual machines can be Hyper-V, then they can also be VMware. A third scenario is I can have a fidel replica of my Active Directory servers on an Azure site recovery. And that is a close replica that has just a delay of a few minutes with your on-premises infrastructure. So you have there also already 3 scenarios where you can back up your Active Directory data. Well, let's say if if it is hacked or corrupted, so you can just go back to the Active Directory status that you had backed up before the corruption or before the hack, and you can restore that correct data. So I hope this answers your questions. In case I have not, just tell me, and I can elaborate on that. So we can also we need to protect our cloud investments. Redundancy, it's great, but it's not backup. So this is also linked to the question about Active Directory you just asked. Okay, I can have a redundancy. Everything I have is redundant on different sites, but it is not a perfect protection. I also need a backup. If some of my data is corrupted, the redundancy can also be corrupted on if it is just replicated, if I just have a low-level type replication. So what about security of my data on Azure? So we have another question. What about security of my data on Azure? You have several measures for your security. As I said, from the on-premises environment, you can encrypt your data. So your encrypted data, your local servers can be encrypted with keys, with encryption keys, and can be backed up that way. So Azure has no visibility on your internal, on your Azure Vault. There will be no visibility on on the data you are backing up. On the destination also, when I have Azure virtual machines, I can also encrypt the data. The vault, there is a digital vault in Azure where the backups are stored. That Azure Vault is also secured with encryption keys. And as an administrator, you have full control over those encryption keys. Still on the security level of my Azure data. Even when I, as an administrator, as a managed service providers for my customers, when I want to, let's say my customer does not wants to change his backup policy, even deleting that backup data is not an easy task. There is a delay between you wanting to delete the data that you have backed up, the result of those backups, and the effective deletion. There is always a time delay of 14 days between the moment you want to delete the result of those backups and the effective deletion. So there is always a delay for that data deletion. I also show the different security certifications, and this is something that I have also experienced personally in my experience. As I told you, I have worked in the IT operations, and I have been in a situation where we had to manage several server racks with on-premises servers, and to think about the security of this data. And I know it's not a small task. But what I can tell you is that the amount of money that I can put in securing my servers, my data, my backups, if I had to do it on my on-premises data center, it would cost me a lot of budget, and it would be much easier for me. I have more visibility. I have better visibility on my Azure. I have more tools on my cloud environment to monitor the security keys, the state of the backups, the accesses, the role-based access control on Azure than if I wanted to do it on-premise. So my Azure backup, it's a simple and reliable cloud integrated backup as a service. So the architecture can be very simple. I have here my on-premises workload with Exchange, SharePoint, Hyper-V, VMware, the Windows servers, the Linux servers. All those are as virtual machines. And I can, on each of those nodes, on those virtual machines, or on those on-premises servers, install an agent, the Azure BackUp agent, that will just, as I schedule it to do, select the selected data that I have selected on that server, on that node, and just back it up to Azure. I can select the whole system state, the whole server, to do a bare metal recovery if needed. But I can also pinpoint specific files and folders and databases to my agent in order to do the backup. So as you can guess, that can be okay if I have just a few servers. But if I have several servers, tens of servers, hundreds of servers, I may need to deploy a local backup server. So I have two choices. I can use the System Center Data Protection Manager as a backup server, or I can also use an Azure backup server, which is a component I can download from my Azure Vault, from my Azure backup environment, and install it locally. So it's a server a software that I install locally that will just connect to my local workload and perform a local backup before sending it to the Azure cloud, to my Azure backup vault in a secure manner. And here I can have different policies. Let's say I can configure my local server to back up my data and keep it locally for, let's say, just 3 days. But once the data is older than 3 days, that's an example of a policy, I want that data to be sent to my Azure cloud. And what do I have to plan for that? I have to plan a specific storage space for my local server, but I also have to plan for my bandwidth. So this is a point that we that we counsel the customers on. When one of the points that you will need to invest in is on your bandwidth and on your upload bandwidth specifications. So depending on the amount of data that you will be sending to the Azure cloud, you will need to have a good planification of your bandwidth. So we have our local on-premises workloads that we can back up to the Azure cloud. We can also back up our virtual machines that are on Azure, that are already on Azure, and I can do a backup directly to my Azure backup service. So just a few minutes before I can give you a short demo of the Azure backup and recovery scenarios. So what are the disaster recovery challenges we face? Our customers have multiple platforms, VMware, Hyper-V, and physical servers. And not all of our disaster recovery solutions support all of our customers' applications. And it is not always easy to perform a disaster recovery drill. So what does Azure Site Recovery provide us with? We can protect several environments, Hyper-V, VMware, physical servers, several applications, our SharePoint, SQL Server Exchange applications, Dynamics applications. If we have Linux virtual machines, we can also include them in our disaster recovery solutions, in our backup solutions. And what we want to do, what we want is a distinct environment where I can know that I have my applications on my virtual machines deployed there. And whenever I want to test if the recovery site is okay, I can start those nodes there without disrupting my production environment. And this is something that Azure can provide us. We can never talk about these disaster recovery scenarios without talking about RTO and RPO. So recovery time objective and recovery point objective. And these are very specific points that I can plan very precisely when I'm using Azure solutions. I can specifically define my recovery time objective. How long will it take me to recover my data? And recovery point objective, to which point do I recover my data? And these can be different if it's a backup. If it's a backup that is performed every 4 hours or every day or every 30 minutes, or if it's a replication. And the replication gives me a really good recovery point objective and recovery time objective. So the scenarios that I have, we as a company have already implemented for some of our customers is a Hyper-V to Microsoft Azure replication. So we select, we don't maybe have to select all the virtual machines on the Hyper-V clusters. We select specific virtual machines that we need to replicate to Microsoft Azure so that we have a good replica in case we have a problem with our Hyper-V host. And that problem is not always a big disaster, like a fire or floods or scenarios like that. Sometimes it can be really something like your storage area network your storage is not working properly, and so the clusters that rely on it are not working. And this is a good scenario in order to shoot up your virtual machines that are on your Azure environment, just the time for you to solve that problem. And this is something I can also do with my VMware or physical environments. Okay, any questions before I give you a short demo about Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery?
No questions for now, Mohamed.
Okay.
Let's look at the demos.
Good. So I'm going back to my Azure infrastructure. So I have showed you previously the resources, the virtual machines, and how to add a resource. The main element in my backup and disaster recovery is my recovery vault. So this vault will host the result of my backups and also the results of my site recovery. It will not only host this, the result of those actions, but I can also define the policies. So I can define my backup policies and my site recovery policy, my recovery plan in this vault. So at any moment, I can have a global view of what I am backing up. So I have already configured backups for my for specific to this vault. I can have an alerts for my, in case I have backups that I failed. The backup pre-checks, the backup jobs, what backup jobs are actually executing or have failed. I have a view of what are the backup items I have. A backup item can be a virtual server, a physical server, a SQL database. All those are counted as backup items. And I can also have what storage am I using? Is it locally or locally redundant storage? When I'm speaking about locally, I'm talking about the region. But also I can also have a geographically redundant storage, meaning my data is stored in this region, but also has a replica on another region, just in case that Azure region has a failure, a temporary failure. I have the same thing also with my recovery, my site recovery. And what does this show me? It shows me that I have one node, one of the virtual machines that is healthily recovered. So I have this specific virtual machine that is live replicated on my Azure site recovery with this storage account. So this is for the Azure virtual machines. If I had set up the scenario for VMware, I would see the status here. And if I had done it for a Hyper-V, I would also see that, that scenario there. And I have a specific monitoring of the replication of this specific virtual machine. I also set up my backup policy. And I have defined a specific backup policy that I can modify, and I can go into the details. I want a specific daily or weekly backup. When I have a daily backup, I can choose the time of that backup with 30-minute slots and the time slot. How I can say that for 2 days, I'm going to retain the instant recovery snapshot. That instant recovery snapshot will allow me to have a quicker restoration, a quicker restore, and it will reduce my recovery time objective. When I backup data, in my policy, I also define how long am I going to retain that backup. And here I had defined that the retention of daily backup points is for 100 days. Let's say I want to retain the monthly backup points on the first day, made on the first day of the month, for how many? For 60 months. This will mean for 5 years. And this policy will be applied, and just in case you would want to delete data from that backup, you will have to go through a lot of steps just to go over this retention period. And I can also have a retention of the yearly backup point. How long am I going to save, am I going to retain this backup data? So this is something I can define on my different Azure backup policies, and I can, okay, let's go to the backup policies, and I can create several backup policies for Azure virtual machines, for SQL Server in Azure virtual machines and for different other scenarios. And at any point, I can create a new Azure Recovery Vault if I have different backup needs. I am not limited to only one Azure Recovery Vault. I can create several others depending on my backup policy. Excuse me. Okay, so I have always on this Azure Recovery Vault, I have here my Azure infrastructure. And for the moment, I just have one Azure backup agent that is on a specific agent that I have installed. So this agent represents an on-premises server. Okay, in reality, it is hosted on Azure, but for this specific server, I can see that the backup item is on the C server. So what do I have on this specific server? It's a specific VM. Okay, it's on VM1. So I have this VM here. So how do I choose to back up the server? On this server, I choose to install the Microsoft Azure Backup Agent. So I'm not going to go through the installation. I want to show you the different results. So I installed the backup agent on this server. Okay. Okay, I was just looking at the questions. So I installed the backup agent on the server with a secure key. I linked the backup agent to my Azure Vault on the cloud. So not anyone can just install the agent and join it to the cloud. I need to know the specific key. There are specific security information that you need to provide in order to join the server. And so this is very familiar with the Windows Server console that we have. And what have we specified here to backup? I can see the history of my different backup jobs, the alerts. I see that they have all been performed successfully. What do I have as a detail? I know that the data I'm backing up is stored on the C drive. The recovery points, in case I wanted to do a restore. So here is the history of the different recovery points that I have on each date and time. So I can choose from these different recovery points. So this can be linked to the questions earlier about the Azure directory or the security of the data on Azure. Let's say at a specific date, my data has been hacked or corrupted. Fortunately, I had some backups of that data, and I can choose a point where that data was healthy, and I can choose to restore it. So I can, at any point, using the same agent, the Microsoft Azure Backup, I can choose, okay, I will create a backup schedule for my system state. Let's just pick up my system state. I want to have a backup every day at, what time is it? 11:05. So let's say 11:30 next. And I can here specify the retention policy. Okay, let's just click next. I chose the system state and finish. So on an Active Directory server, this is the backup I'm going to use, and this will allow me to have the system state backup. And on an Active Directory server, on a domain controller, the system states includes the Active Directory information. I also have the possibility to back up the whole virtual machine. So this was the case of a specific backup of specific data on a server. So it could be a virtual server, it could be a physical server, it does not matter. Let's have another scenario where on my Azure environment, I have this recovery vault. Let's go to my Azure recovery, to my Azure environment. And I have just added a web server. So it's a Linux web server with the different information. I could just come here and on the backup pane. Where is it anyway? Okay, here on the backup pane, I could just come here and click to create a new backup policy. I can start it from here, but I can also start it from the Azure Recovery Vault. So here on the Azure Recovery Vault, I need to initiate a new backup. I can specify where is the workload that I want to backup is. I can choose Azure Stack on-premises. Let's say, just as an example, I wanted to backup on-premises data. I have these different choices. I can choose files and folders, Hyper-V virtual machines, VMware virtual machines, or specific servers like a SQL server, a SharePoint, an Exchange server, a system state, or a bare metal recovery. And that can really help you for your Active Directory servers and other elements. But I have a server that is on Azure, and it is a virtual machine. Okay, let's launch the backup. I choose the daily policy, or the backup policy that I have shown earlier. It will do a backup daily at 12 a.m. UTC, and it will retain the daily backup for 180 days. I have at the moment no virtual machine selected, and I will just go on and select my web server, my existing web server. Okay. If I wanted to back up other virtual machines with different policies, I would just choose them. And I just enable the backup. So at this point, my virtual server that is on Azure is backed up, has a backup policy that is activated, and this virtual machine will be backed up on my Azure Recovery Vault. So we have seen here two scenarios where I have a virtual machine that is on premises, that can be on premises. I install the agent and I define a backup that will send it to Azure. I have another scenario here where the server is already on Azure, on the cloud, and I choose to back it up on Azure. It can be a different region. I can choose to place it in a very different direction. Okay, I have a very nice questions from Ivan. Let's say on a virtual machine, how do I activate my disaster recovery site on Azure? So I'm soon coming to this point in my demo. I want to know the status of my backups. Let's see what has changed in my backup history. So you see, previously I had, when I started the demo, I had 2 backup items. Now I have 4. The 2 additionals are the system state backup that I initiated from my Windows server, and the 4th one is the virtual server that I have added, and I can see the details of these items here. So I have 2 Azure backup agents, meaning the on-premises server, and this is what I have here: data from the C drive and data from the system state. And I can clearly see here that the system state for this server has not been backed up yet, because the schedule has not yet executed. If I go to the other backup items, I have, okay, I already saw this one. The virtual machines, so I have these 2 virtual machines that are in my backup policy. I have a Windows Server virtual machine, and the last restore point is from this morning, it was this night. And I have this web server which has not been backed up yet. Okay, and I can just select this one and tick backup now. Okay, so I just launched the backup of that virtual machine. Okay, so the backup for web server 1 has been triggered. And as an administrator, I can have a really detailed view of the different backup jobs, their success or failures, and I can go see what type of backup was it. Was it the full virtual machine with all its storage, or was it specific files and folders? And here I have a unified view of the backup, whether it is on premises or whether it is on Azure. So we can say that even if you had let's say you had a Windows server, let's say the server was on Amazon or Google Cloud, I would do the same policy to activate its backup and send the backup to Azure, so that I have a consolidated view of all my Azure, of all my backup information. Okay, just a few minutes left. This was for the backup policies. Let's say I want to go and do some site recovery. Okay, what is the object of the site recovery? I have a virtual machine, whether it is on premises, Hyper-V on VMware, or it is on the cloud. I can include that virtual machine in my site recovery policy. So let's just go and say I want to replicate. So I initiate the replication. I first need to define the source. What I want to replicate is on premises. I'm not performing a migration, no. What is the source location? So here, at this point, there are some security features. So what do I need to do here? If I want to, are you performing a migration? No. Okay, so what I would have here is, let's say I have a Hyper-V host locally. With this Azure Site Recovery, I will download a small software module with an encryption key, and I will execute it on the Hyper-V host. And this execution will create a link between that on-premises Hyper-V host and my site recovery, my Azure Recovery Vault on the cloud. And if I have not performed this action, I cannot define the select location. So I need to create a secure link, a secure definition between my local Hyper-V hosts or VMware hosts and the Azure Security Vault. So I will take the scenario of this Azure, and the source location is in North Europe, where I have hosted my my existing virtual machines. So I can see it here. Okay, let's see. I have my virtual machines. All my virtual machines here are located in the North Europe region. So this is my source location. I'm going to just create a new disaster recovery between availabilities in the same availability zone. And I'm going to select the virtual machines that I want to replicate in that site recovery policy. So I just choose this one, because the web server I have already included in another site recovery scenario. So I just select this virtual machine. And it will perform a replication of the environment. So I am replicating my Azure virtual machines from their location in North Europe. Okay, let's try South Africa North. I have not tried it yet with the specific data center, and this is so it is accepted. So what will it do? It will create a replica of the environment. So it will create a resource group a virtual network, because those machines will be in a virtual network, a storage account, it will replicate the managed disks. It has detected one standard disk because I have selected one virtual machine, and it will create a target availability set. So I'm going to create the target resources, and I can also customize my replication policy, meaning at which frequency will I be replicating the data. So at this moment, my Azure site recovery is being created in the South African North data center region, and it will host the replica from my virtual machines that are in the North Europe region. So I'm going to leave it creating this resource, and I'm going to show you the result of an already existing site recovery vault. So let's go back to my site recovery vault. And I had already done this with my existing web server. So here is the schema. So I have one virtual machine that is currently replicated, and it is marked as being healthy, meaning the replication has been going in a healthy manner between for this virtual machine. Okay. And I can have this all the history. I can choose to disable the replication. I can choose to refresh. I can have the latest recovery points for this specific virtual machine. Let's just give it time to freshen up. And one important information you see here, the recovery point objective is 2 minutes. So what is important here is that I have such a good bandwidth between my two regions that there is just a 2-minute delay between the state of the original machine, virtual machine, and the state of its replica. So in case I have a crash on the original site, my recovery point objective is of 2 minutes. So I can have my machines just with a 2 minutes delay. And here are the different recovery points that I can choose from. So you see I have here a 5-minute delay. It is performed every 5 minutes. So this is not, I have to distinguish this from a backup. This is a replication scenario, it is not a backup. And I can have a combination of both on my Azure site recovery. Let's go to my site recovery, replicated items. Okay, I have this one, this virtual machines that is replicated, and we have at the moment customers that can list their 10 or 15 virtual machines that are replicated. For some, we can see the status of the replication, and for others, we can see whether or not the replication has been successful or not. If the machine stays, let's just say 10 minutes without a correct replication, you have an alert message that you need to address. Just to finish on that point, when I want to test a failover, what it does is that it executes on my Azure environment the replica of this virtual machine, and I can test it to see whether everything is well replicated. Okay, so that was those were examples of how I can create a backup policy, monitor my backup infrastructure. I see here that I have a backup job that is in progress, and I can go and see the details. So this web server is being backed up at the moment. and I can see a very detailed information about the backup status. And this unified view of the backups, I say unified because with this you can manage the backup of your Azure cloud environment, of your on-premises environment, or even of other virtual machines that would be on other cloud environments. So this was a demo of the Azure backup features, Azure site recovery features. Shalini, do we have any other questions? I hope I have addressed all the questions that you have asked me. Just in case there are some points that you want to address, we will share our contact information in in the last slide. Let me just finish by saying that we provide training on Azure solutions. So even if you are not in the same region, you can go on our website and have information about the training on Azure, MS365, SharePoint SQL Server, and we conduct this training online. We can also do it face to face, but we now conduct most of our training online. So don't hesitate to contact us in case you have training needs, specifically on the Microsoft technologies, training and certification that we correct it needs.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Shalini, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Mohammed, for this insightful presentation, very enriching. We don't have any questions for now, so everyone, if you have any queries or if you want to know more about our upcoming webinars, you have all the details in the comment section. You can visit our LinkedIn page for any updates. And please reach out to our team, Mohammed or myself, for any queries. Thank you for joining us today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Mohammed. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.